Hello, hello, and welcome to episode 12 of Baki Talki, the thrilling conclusion to the Dorian arc, which has been going on for a month of real time. I'm really excited to talk about this episode, and I'm really excited about our guest this week. It's Greg.
Hey, Steve. How you doing?
I'm doing good. So, Greg, every guest I have on, I always ask them two questions, just so the audience can get a chance to get to know you a bit better. So first off, other than Baki, what shows are you currently watching?
Oh, good question. I am watching Barry, Hacks, MasterChef Canada. We just finished Stranger Things. There's lots on the go. You know, considering it's summer, I'm watching an astounding, depressing number of TV shows right now. But I am a stranger to anime. That was my first one ever.
You're a stranger thing to TV.
Don't push it.
So that follows perfectly into the next question. Before watching this episode, what did you know about Baki?
Absolutely nothing. And I strove to keep it that way. I went in, I didn't even read the episode description. I just knew the title because I confirmed that I was watching the right one with you. Quite an arcane titling system, I guess. So there's lots of pitfalls in trying to find the right episode to watch, but we got there.
Perfect. Yeah, you're one of my guests. I feel like I've talked about the podcast with a lot of people beforehand. I don't know if I've mentioned this at all before. I just sent you a message saying, do you want to come on the podcast?
I have no idea. I know you were podcasting, and I think you talked to me about a previous one you worked on, but this is extremely fresh. I have no idea what we're going to talk about.
Perfect. Yeah, Home Away from Dome, the Under the Dome podcast, still available
yes.
on Apple.
Yeah. I believe you shut down the Apple servers with that one. It was 3 billion downloads in the first 24 hours, right?
Oh, yeah, they wrote articles about it. It was like the cover art of a big dome over the Apple servers. Big hit. The 4-person Under the Dome fandom loved it. So this episode is, as I was saying, it's the thrilling conclusion to Dorian's subplot. It was funny that I was debating on a few people to bring on this episode because I want to get my mom on the podcast at some point. And the first shot of the episode is Dorian barfing because he got punched so hard in the gut. And then he pretty much immediately breaks his hand, and I was just like, this isn't the one. But I wanted to, so much happens at the beginning, which can be basically boiled down to Doppo kicking Dorian's ass. I wanted to get your thoughts on how this episode started.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you texted me in advance saying, warning, the show is a bit gory. I have like an hour and a half commute every day to work, and I downloaded the episode thinking, you know, I'll pump this out on a commute. And I was riding the train up, and I watched like the first 20 seconds, and as you say, there's a lot of anime barf, and then a surprisingly like anatomically correct shattering of a hand, just like fingers flying all over the place. And then I think 30 seconds later, his rib cage is just pummeled to smithereens. And so I went back to Reddit for a bit for the rest of my train ride, just because it was ridiculous.
Not something you can watch on the train. Yeah, I wanted to talk about when he gets his ribs obliterated. So Doppo punches him in the ribs, and you see like one of those inside shots where the bones crack. And I thought, wow, that was a strong punch. Then he does it about 85 more times to the point where his bones have... It's like in Jack and the Beanstalk when the giant says he'll grind your bones into bread. Like, his ribs are gone.
Pretty accurate, yeah. And one of the henchmen is like kind of soundtracking that while he's punching him, saying, you know, no matter how much muscle you have, your rib cage will still take damage.
His middle straight punch is like nobody else's. No matter how much protective muscle the opponent's got, his ribcage will take damage.
And I'm just like, yeah, that's a pretty... You've seen this guy do this before, I think. Yeah, you've seen Doppo do that. Because... And not only that, but the internal shot of the ribcage didn't seem to have any other organs. I don't know whether they just sort of ran out of money at the end doing the pickups, but...
It was interesting to see his bones sort of just shatter, like, I guess, into a void that is the inside of his chest cavity.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, maybe it's a Grinch thing where I don't know much about the context of the character. He didn't seem particularly heartless, although I guess we'll get onto that later.
I don't know. He seemed like a pretty bad dude to me in this episode. But we'll get there.
Well, that's what was interesting. Yeah, I mean, I went in like, basically had the cover photo, so I knew that Baki was a character, but doesn't appear in this whole first sequence, and so I had no idea who I was rooting for, who I was rooting against. It was a really interesting way to watch the middle of a TV show.
Well, I'll give you the 5-second spiel because it leads into what happens next. Dorian is a death row inmate who spontaneously decided that he was going to fly to Japan to taste defeat because he's never been defeated in his life.
Right. 4
other guys had the same thought spontaneously. It's called synchronicity, but they're not in this episode too much. So Dorian, as he's getting completely demolished, his ribs are gone, his kneecaps also gone. He realizes that this might finally be the moment where he can be defeated. What do you think about that idea of just wanting to lose that badly?
Yeah, I mean, it makes a lot of sense to me. I think, you kind of can't get a sense of how good somebody is at something until they're unable to do it, or until they're bested by somebody, right? I think it's a common theme in a lot of sports, and not to get too esoteric on you, but it's a common theme in I took a history and philosophy of science class at university, and there's a guy called Karl Popper who says that a theory can only be disproved. If you can't disprove a theory, it's not a theory. Something that applies to every case is basically useless. So I like that idea of only really knowing your true strength once you're defeated. Otherwise, where's your ceiling? What's your true nature? So it got quite philosophical quite early, I thought.
Yeah, no, and I agree. I do think I see that a lot in sports, like being in Toronto and having the Leafs around. Like, they are often seeking defeat, from what I can tell.
Yeah, and with that, and it's the opposite, right? It's like, how bad can they be? Is there a team they can beat? And therefore, do we know, are they even playing the same sport as the rest of the league?
Exactly. So after losing his rib cages, his kneecaps, bleeding a lot out of his nose in just a constant stream, you might think that Doppo is going to punch him and finish the job.
Have I been defeated?
It's over. Time to end it.
Instead, unbeknownst to everybody else at the amusement park where this takes place, Kato is wheeled out in a wheelchair, pretty much comatose. Greg, do you want to describe what happens?
Yeah, so Doppo kind of pump fakes, and Dorian looks like disappointed at first, right? Because you kind of hear his monologue about like, this is finally going to be defeat, and his teeth are chattering in a really intense way. And then we pan up over the henchmen to see a guy who's honestly, to me, looks exactly like Killick from the Soul Calibur games. I don't know if you ever played those, but I expected him to have like an 8-foot hitting rod. There's probably a better name for that, but I don't know what it is. that's the dictionary term. Okay. And they wheel Kato out, and his doctor peels in with I guess a protege of Doppo's and says, this guy is like on the verge of death, critical condition. How dare you get him out of the hospital?
What in the world's going on here? Dragging this man out of the hospital when he's in critical condition? Are you trying to kill him?
He's deathly ill, and he'll never wake up. And sure enough, kind of in the background of that shot, you see Kato's bandages come off. You see there's kind of some sort of like spectral force trailing behind Kato. I don't know if that's like contextualized somewhere else. It's like
there's no real explanation for that.
Okay, yeah. See, I don't know how tight we go here with the narratives. But
sometimes fighters just start glowing because they're really strong.
And that's exactly what happens, right? He sets a light. He doesn't punch him either, right? I'm just trying to remember.
He just goes, ah.
And he just drives the fear of God into Dorian, and I think Dorian's like finally ready, right? He's like, this is how I go out. I don't know did they fight earlier on in the series? Is that why Kato's comatose?
Yeah. So they met in a sewer. Dorian hypnotized him and then basically almost decapitated him and then shoved him in a punching bag. Then,
Okay, yeah, that was my guess for what happened, but I just wanted to confirm.
yeah, it's one of those shows where you can if you read between the lines.
Yeah, you can. It's pretty heavily telegraphed, the punching bag, the decapitation stuff. Yeah.
Just to like hammer home, like Kato, you could not be closer to death than Kato was. Like, first of all, his doctor describes him as comatose due to lack of blood.
Now see here, Kato is in critical condition after suffering blunt force trauma to his entire body, to say nothing of dozens of bone fractures. The man is comatose due to extensive loss of blood.
Which I don't think is typically a reason you go into a coma. I think it's a reason you die. And secondly, in the episode where Kato was shoved in a body bag, like, I couldn't include the clip of listing all of his injuries because it was so long. I literally... I split it into 3 separate audio channels that just played simultaneously.
I did love the doctor says he's got blunt force trauma to his entire body, which that's the sign of a thorough adversary. You know, that's the sign of somebody who really went the extra mile to make sure that the trauma was over your entire body.
What do you do if your friend comes to you and it's just like, oh man, I'm at the hospital. What happened? Blunt force trauma to the entire body. That's rough.
Go. Yeah, let's get a beard and unpack that, I think.
I can't leave the hospital. Got a lack of blood.
Yeah, got not enough blood. I do like that idea that it's like a low battery mode, you know, when you put your phone onto low battery mode and the kind of animations get duller and the phone gets a bit slower. That seems to be what the doctors prescribed there for Kato is like, we can do most stuff with just some blood. We'll wait for the rest of the blood to be made or transfused, and then we can maybe turn on your eyes and brain.
Instead, Kato spends 100% of his blood to stand up and then go.
His feet are really swollen when he stands up out of the chair. I do remember that from the shot, and I'm like, that seems accurate. I was in the hospital for about a week once, and my feet were like 3 times the size. You couldn't have strapped me into the world's biggest Crocs, so I liked that attention to detail.
The anatomy in this show is very well done. So Dorian responds to Kato's very cool yell by just bawling, tears pouring out, and it appears that he has finally been defeated.
Don't worry about it. You wouldn't understand.
That's not the case, but it certainly seems like this man with no ribs, no knees, no brain has been defeated.
Yeah, I couldn't tell that the crying fit, which is, you know, pretty profound. You know, he's like sobbing. He's completely lost it. I couldn't tell whether that was, and maybe you're getting to this, and I'm totally jumping the gun here, but I couldn't tell whether he was disappointed that he hadn't been finished off, disappointed in himself that he had allowed himself to get into such a vulnerable position, or whether he was just, you know, shit scared of the guy he thought he'd decapitated stood in front of him on fire.
Yeah, I think with context, and I could be very easily persuaded on this because it's a very deep text, I think that you're right. I think that he is disappointed that he wasn't defeated. When I watched the scene, I assumed he was just defeated, but spoiler alert, he's not. So let's jump ahead to the next scene. So Dorian goes to the hospital, as well as Kato, and we get another classic Baki tradition of doctors explaining what happened after the fight. Last time we found out the guy was actually 97 years old.
Dorian is, or the doctor?
The previous death row inmate. This is death row inmate 2 out of 5.
I see.
Yeah, no. This time we find out that Dorian has some sort of foreign object in the palm of his hand that shows up on X-rays. Now, the doctor assumes, sort of out of the blue, that it might be an explosive device, and if you whack your hand, you could make a big explosion.
Good heavens. You know what I think? It might be an explosive device. A miniature bomb with a detonator. meant to work like this. The impact would set the thing off.
His intern doctor, of course, says, "Oh, I think it might be time for you to go to sleep, old man."
Doctor, really? It's late, sir. You're tired.
Yeah, just a shocking moment of ageist gaslighting there. Just like really, really out of line doctor's assistant. I mean, this guy has clearly been in the business a while. He's patched up a lot of death row inmates. And he already did enhance on the x-ray twice. You know, he looked at it, he said enhance, and it got bigger, and he said enhance, and it got bigger. So I don't know what more you want. He's looked at it really close, and he knows an arm-embedded IED when he sees one.
And I'm skeptical why they needed to enhance in the first place. Like, it'd be like if I had an x-ray where I had, like, I don't know, I was missing my thumb, and the guy was like, "There's something off with this x-ray. It shows my entire arm." It's like... Let's just zoom in on the hand.
Zoom in on that absence of thumb. See what we can get there.
His bicep, or his the bicep bone. Yeah. Anyway, so Dorian, it turns out, is there's no real sense of time here. This could be 5 minutes after Kato yelled at him, or this could be like 2 weeks. But it turns out Dorian is walking around the hospital now, with no knees or ribs.
Yeah, no, he's in those he's in some pretty intense braces. My dad had those when he had ACL surgery. I'll probably have them in 5 years once I ski literally one more time and both my knees blow up. Reminded me of like the Gattaca leg extensions. Those were cool. I thought maybe while they were in there putting fake kneecaps in, they could have given him a couple extra inches. It might help in the next fight, but he seemed the same height.
Yeah, and honestly, they seem better than regular knees because he jumps out of a window immediately.
Yeah, and then that freeze frame as he's in midair, is that like a motif that they go back to, or is that a hallmark of anime?
No,
just for fun.
It's just sort of weird, honestly. It's not very typical of this show.
It struck me as like a 4:55 on a Friday. The animator drew that frame, and then he's like, fuck it. Or can I swear?
No, we're gonna have to cut it short. Sorry, everybody.
I lost my podcasting privileges. Yeah, and
of
the
course
animator
you can
says,
swear.
He says, yeah, fuck it. We'll freeze it there. Cast a sort of red pall over the whole thing, and smash cut to the next sequence.
Yeah, and this sequence, I did some research on this sequence. One issue with Baki, and you'll never guess that this episode has way more female representation than 90% of Baki episodes, because there's 2 female characters in 3 seasons. Wow. But what I found out is that Doppo's wife, Natsue, actually is a character who was a bigger part of previous seasons way back in the year 2000. And Doppo comes home and says her name, and that, I believe, is the last time she's been mentioned in about 20 years of the Baki manga. So I was hoping we'd see her. But anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself, because one of my favorite lines of the episode is Dorian gets out of his limo at his house and then tells his driver,
"Wait till she sees I got my hand back. The wife's gonna have a fit."
Yeah, that was, I don't know what that was. I mean, I know what it was, but yeah, surprisingly crass, and definitely crossing an employer-employee line. You know, that guy's got to take it to...
yeah, he'll have to bring it up with the Shinshinkai Human Resources Department.
Yeah,
but
HR.
But the implication here, so just for reference, Doppo got his hand cut off by Dorian a few weeks ago, and then got sewn back on, and he's been wearing a cast. So, like, obviously nobody else knew. He was keeping it a secret. But why didn't he tell his wife?
Yeah, what's their communication strategy like? Yeah. And I did notice when he went in, he sort of slides open the sliding door just a fraction. And then he sees some debris on the floor or something, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And then instantly destroys his own front door. You know, it's like you were already sliding it open. You had the motion down. Yeah. A couple more seconds of that, the door is wide open. You can walk through, even, you know, with your larger than usual frame. But he just absolutely loses it instantly. And I assume those are pretty well made, and he just makes mincemeat of it.
Honey, I'm home.
I feel like it's easy to imagine that you wouldn't do that, but if I was Doppo, which is basically the Hulk, like, I feel like I would break doors and just because it is a very emotional moment to come home, find your entire house ransacked, and a lighter on the ground.
Right, which I assume was emblematic of Dorian.
Yeah, that's where Dorian kept his dental floss that was harder than steel, that he used to cut off people's hands and stuff. I don't know why I even had it on the ground. Anyway, long story short, Doppo runs in, yells where his wife is, no response, yells Dorian, and then Dorian, the 8-foot tall man, who apparently was hiding out of sight, slaps Doppo in the face, detonates the explosive just like the doctor said, and that's the end of Doppo's face.
Natsue! Dorian!
Yeah, really, and really under the radar. I mean, usually I don't know how it is in like in anime shows, but that's the kind of moment where you get a huge speech, right? Like you get, like you put him, you sort of restrain him or whatever, and then you deliver the explosive blow. But I think you have 10 frames to see that it's Dorian, and then it's like boom. And I like that. I like that economy of storytelling.
Well, and it's not like Dorian doesn't get to talk, because afterwards he gets to reprise his famous Ma Vie song.
Yeah.
L'amour de ma vie. Oh, the love of my life you are. My dream and my shining guiding star. And no matter how small or foolish you may seem, you're still the only dream I dream.
What was that?
He did that. He did that when he fought Kato, except I thought at the time that was to hypnotize him. Now it seems like he just likes singing that song just for fun.
I mean, he's got a great voice. I don't know why he was on death row. It certainly wasn't for being out of tune, but
I wanted to take some time to appreciate the voice actor for Dorian, because that guy, he's got a real knack for the subtleties of voice acting. We haven't even got to the part where he starts saying candy.
Yeah, true. That was a real tour de force. That's the kind of character. It could have been 5 different actors playing him. Sometimes, who is it on The Simpsons that can't sing?
Marge.
Yeah, Julie Kavner, right? She can't sing, and they always pipe someone else in for her, I think, when one of the many musical numbers. So I just figured that guy's voice was so good that they had someone else doing it. But you're telling me it's all the same guy.
Yeah. Well, and he does Marge too.
Who does Marge?
The guy who does Dorian. It's Julie Kavner.
Man, you got me there.
Ow! Don't make me break your arm!
Anyway. Yeah, so Dorian basically blew off Doppo's face, does a little singing, little song and dance. And then, of course, the next logical step in the story is Baki is walking home from another date with Kozue. It's... Greg, you wouldn't have caught on this because it's the first episode you've watched. Basically, the only time we see Baki nowadays is walking home on dates from Kozue.
Right.
What did you think of this young couple?
Yeah, it seemed very much like a won't they relationship. Just two folks who just can't express their feelings, and I imagine relatable for a good chunk of the viewership. But I liked it. It was a nice. It was all shot really low, so I kept expecting, and I think it eventually happens, like the foot splashing in the puddle in the foreground. They're not alone in this well lit alleyway. It must be said. Japan knows what they're doing,
Yes.
Urban design wise. It's a really, really safe place to walk, I think. So not sure what the 10-minute waiting thing was about, but anyway, go ahead.
Well, I think the 10-minute is so that, like, she goes home, her mom thinks she's, like, sleeping in bed, and then 10 minutes later she sneaks out to see Baki for some hanky-panky. But that might just be me. I just wanted to point out, this is the third time that we've seen them walking around Tokyo on a date, and it's the third time that it's ended with that exact shot, where an ominous stranger is standing behind them. The first time it was Spec. The last episode, it was Yujiro, and I don't want to spoil who it was this time yet, because we'll come back to this plot line. It was a nice little interlude. I had enough of seeing Doppo's disgusting skinless face.
For sure. And I did the full Leo DiCaprio meme when he came on screen. I'm like, that's the guy that the show is named after. Like, we're 12 minutes into the episode, and here he is coming home from a date, and everybody else seems to be fighting, and he's just, I guess, more of a lover than a fighter, or he doesn't fight this episode. No, I mean, I just thought the whole thing about them, you know, Baki wants to ask, what did you say her name was? Kozue?
Yep.
He wants to ask Kozue back to his room, and he doesn't. And then she wants him to ask her back to his room, and he doesn't.
Will you,
Will I what?
just say it. Will you come to my room tonight? Will you look at the time? It's late and...
You don't even have a watch.
So that's why I thought the 10 minutes thing was just like to keep safe watch or whatever. Because it's like if she's just breaking out the window after 10 minutes, then I guess they just haven't crossed the going back to Baki's room line yet as a couple, which is a momentous occasion. Maybe his room's a real mess.
Well, they had their first kiss last week, so which also the chronology of this was a day ago or the same night. It's very difficult to keep track of what's going on.
Yeah, wow. Well, that didn't seem like their second kiss that I watched. They really got all up in there. That was like one beyond a French kiss. That was a Belgian kiss.
Yeah. Well, wow.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, she learned how to breathe, which she didn't know how to do the first time. All right. So going back to Dorian, who you just can't knock him down. As a previous guest said, Dorian is all about the reversal of fortunes. So Dorian is confronted by Retsu, Kaio Retsu, our Chinese friend, who comes over and starts talking to him and brings up the interesting point that Dorian, his whole drive is to taste defeat and to be defeated. And if you go into every fight hoping to be defeated and you lose every time, have you ever truly tasted victory?
You've been invincible up till now, and yet what you've longed for is defeat. In that sense, you have never truly won.
What are your thoughts?
I think Retsu really puts into words what I was thinking. You know, it's like, I guess it does, it asks kind of a serious question about what drives athletes at the top of their game. It's, if after years of domination, they must secretly be hoping for, somebody to come along and pip them to it, even though on the face of it, that would be the worst thing that could happen, would be for them to fall off their ledge. But I don't know, it almost reinforces the idea that they were on top for so long, right? That it took so long for them to be knocked off. So I empathize with what Retsu's saying. I was pretty distracted by his incredible eyebrows, but I think the substance of what he was saying was pretty spot on.
No, that's how you can tell it's Retsu. Just look at the brows.
What did you think? I mean, if Dorian's on death row, it seems to me like he's had a taste of judicial defeat, if nothing else. Prosecutorial defeat.
Well, to be fair, he broke out and killed the entire prison. So it didn't really feel like he was really defeated. I think Dorian is an absolute loon, and I don't think he is. I think that anytime I've tried to sit down and judge what he's doing or his deeper motivation, I don't know. Maybe when we're done the recording, I can show you some clips of when Dorian went to the amusement park. But I have had real trouble trying to track down what he's thinking one way or the other. And I prefer to solve it, much like Retsu does, by immediately punching him in the face so hard that he regresses to the mind of a 5-year-old child.
Yeah. I need to work on that punch. That would be useful in so many scenarios, like a total regression punch.
This has been just a fleeting dream that now comes to an end. This fist will end it.
Yeah. So Retsu punches Dorian, who finally accepts defeat. And we cut to an ambulance where Retsu is in the ambulance with Dorian. Dorian looks up into the Tokyo sky and just says, "Candy."
Candy. Candy.
And then
That was good. You're the voice actor.
Yeah. Oh my god. I'm gonna probably play the entire clip because it's so funny. But yeah, Dorian for some reason sees Tokyo Tower, and I guess he sees the lights coming off it like little candy balls, and talks about how his dad only gives him 2 pieces of candy.
My daddy, he'd only give me 2 pieces of candy. But I wanted more than that.
It's pretty goofy. But my favorite part of the whole thing is Retsu just says he'll give him all the candy he wants, and he looks like he's about to cry. He looks like he looks like somebody who's just experienced the miracle of childbirth or something.
No more candy.
Don't worry. I'll buy you a whole mountain of candy.
You mean it? You really will?
As much of it as you can eat.
Like, what do you think was going on through Retsu's mind at that moment?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm just kind of out on a limb here because I don't know their relationship from previous in the show, but you know,
there isn't one.
Right? Okay. Dorian talks about in that sequence about how his dad never gave him enough candy, and you know, he's a big lad, so he must have had a good amount of candy. He wasn't, you know, going hungry by any means. But then I think when Retsu sees that, there's almost kind of like a father-son relationship there. Maybe, you know, it's like watching your father be vulnerable for the first time. You know, that can be a really hard thing to see. And I wonder if maybe that's what Retsu was going through, was like, okay, now person I considered at least a role model, if not a father figure, is now a child again, a massive
I was gonna say it's a real sugarcoating of the scenario to call it being vulnerable.
That's being physically and mentally obliterated, shall we say? Yeah,
my therapist said that I should try and be more vulnerable. So
yeah,
give
I got
me
punched in the face so hard, I forgot the last 60 years of my life. And the sad thing is that a child that size is not going to get to go on any rides. You know, that's going to be a really hard second childhood for Dorian. I mean, you know, he's too young for the internet and too old for the teacup ride. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it sends him into a second life of crime, the frustration of that.
Greg, I cannot wait to show you a clip, but we'll wait until the end of this episode. Yeah, so that's the end of Dorian. Dorian is up there with my favorite of the death row inmates. So Speck and Dorian. Well, we might see Dorian again in a bit, but he was great, and I think that all of the other death row inmates are not going to be anywhere near as satisfying as this arc was. So a champagne pop sound effect for Dorian being eliminated.
You said that's 2 out of 5.
Yes.
Okay. 5's an interesting, you know, usually you get 3, or is Scott Pilgrim 7?
7 evil X's, yeah.
Yeah. 5. I mean, you're splitting the difference there, I guess. It's still an odd number, so you get that feeling of finality on the last one, but
to be honest, I think that the author sort of had the same thought eventually, where he's like, why did I pick 5? Because we spend so much time on Speck and Dorian. And
he beats the last 3 at once, just like there's a kitchen fire or something that takes them all out.
The last 3 are beaten by people who haven't been introduced into the show yet, more or less. Maybe not Doyle, but we'll get there. So the episode ends not with Dorian, but with Baki and Kozue. So Kozue is in her room, waiting, debating if maybe she should go see Baki. We get lots of very like romantic shots of Baki's face. Definitely a strong point of the episode. Hey, Editor Steve here. When I was doing this episode, I realized that when Kozue comes home, we actually have a scene that passes the Bechdel test, so I'm going to play the scene in its entirety. Just throwing this in here.
I'm home, Mom.
There you are. Something to eat?
I already ate.
Okay. Good night, then.
And she hears some taps on the window. What was tapping on the window, Greg?
Good question. I mean, it was very rhythmic. You know, it's not like you're sort of Romeo throwing pebbles and he's getting one every other try. It was like, could have been, you know, those dolls that you dip in not the dolls, the ducks that you dip in a cup of water.
like a flamingo.
Yeah, could have been a dipping duck.
It could have been somebody with very strong fingers, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, that kind of threw me for a loop. I have to say, I watched most of the episode twice, and that was the only part that I saw. I just watched once. Was the last sequence with Kozue. It's 3 full taps, I think, right, on the window. 3 double taps, and then she goes and swings it open, and there's nothing.
Yes, and much like a Batman-like figure, unseen to Kozue, is one of our death row inmates. It's Sikorsky, the man with very strong fingers. He's back.
Make a sound and I will kill you both. Understood?
Wow. Wait till Dobbo's wife hears about him.
Yeah, man, she's going to throw a fit. Yeah, so the episode ends on a cliffhanger. Sikorsky has broken in and has basically kidnapped Kozue in her own room. What will Baki do? We'll have to wait until next week to find out. All right. Well, that was a blast of an episode. I think that you had the toughest job of any guest yet. I think that this being the conclusion to a storyline, like, people are just in places with no context given. I think it must have been difficult to follow.
No, I loved it. I mean, yeah, it's funny. The one thing I will say is that the Dorian pops up a few times in a few different angles, a few different sort of lighting schemes in the first few minutes, and it wasn't until the second watch that I realized they were all the same person. I would say it's amazing what the animators what kind of leeway they'll take once an audience is like built into a story and they can kind of show almost nothing of a character's face and you know who it is, but I'm like, okay, here's another new guy. I guess with the cast of characters is already at like 46 people after a minute, but it's all the same 2 guys. So that was something to adjust to. Now the punch that
Retsu
makes Dorian throw up in the first second of the episode.
Yeah.
His henchmen talk about it. What is it? The single-handed blade stop or something?
First off, it's not his henchman. That's his son and Retsu.
Oh, okay. Retsu's there. Okay, see, that's just goes to show.
He's wearing a blue shirt in that part, so it's a bit confusing.
Completely different. I should have noticed the eyebrows though.
Yeah, at the end of the episode, I think he did 2 things at once. Dorian had a knife on his boot, and he tried to kick him with it. And then Doppo did the thing where you clap your hands on the blade, which every martial artist recommends you do that. And then blocked the blade and, I don't know, kneed him or punched him in the gut, something like that. Yeah, there was a lot of fighting in the previous episode as well.
I mean, I didn't think knives were allowed. I thought this was hand-to-hand combat. Is Dorian's a dirty fighter, I guess?
Yes, so that's the whole thesis of this season that you stumbled on. It's can the true pure martial art fighters defeat death row inmates who surprisingly don't follow the rules very well. You'd missed 90% of Dorian's tricks. The knife blade is honestly the most conventional weapon. He also hypnotizes people. He lights them on fire. He had acid in his stomach. One time he coughed up a grenade and just threw it at people.
Jesus. Okay, well now I'm taking it back about Dorian. This thing about it's not a noble search for defeat. If you cheat every time, then I don't care when you get defeated. That's a comeuppance, not some sort of psychic catharsis.
This is what I mean.
Fuck that guy.
Yeah, Dorian. I don't think Dorian is that deep. I think he's just a guy who is ready to kill.
Have you ever had a guess that it took the entire episode to figure out that the villain was the villain before? Because I'm happy to be the new guy for you.
No, that's fair. To be fair, the guy Doppo also looks like a villain with his like eye patch and vibe going on. But anyway.
Yeah. That took me a little while to get the guy with the eye patch and the guy without the eye patch.
Yeah. All right. So, question for you now that we've finished the episode. Now that you've watched an episode of Baki, even watched it twice, do you think that Baki is a good show?
I think it is an absolutely wild show. I may watch the last couple just to see where it goes. I can't say I'll watch it from the beginning, but I think there's only 2 or 3 left in the season, right? So,
yeah, you could. The season 1 ends on next week's episode, but it's like when you take Breaking Bad and cut the 5th season in half. It's to get the satisfying one, you might want to watch another 14 episodes.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll do that. Yeah, I think it is a good show. I mean, it's certainly like, really well animated. When was it made? Did you say early 2000s?
So the story was written in the 2000s because just quickly, Baki is one of the longest running manga of all time. But the anime is from 2018, so only a few years ago.
Wow. And the manga is obviously really successful. Is the show successful?
I don't know. It's still on the air, sort of. Baki Hanma is still on the air.
And that's like, is that Japanese for Baki and Friends, or what? What's the next part of it?
Hanma's his last name.
Oh, okay. Nice. I like that. It's just to clarify. And then the 3rd series will be his middle name included as well.
Baki Hanma and Friends, of course.
And Sons.
Yes. Oh man. Well, yeah, the whole thing is a family drama. We just haven't got to spend too much time with his dad and half brother yet.
See, it's always the dads.
Yeah, especially when your dad is the strongest creature on earth, as he's lovingly referred to.
Well, I can relate. I mean, my dad could beat up your dad, so that makes sense.
All right. Well, I'll see you with your dad in the parking lot. I'll bring my dad.
Of Marineland. We need to find a similarly shitty amusement park.
I think we'll need a better amusement park than Marineland. Anywho, thank you for coming on the episode, Greg. It was a blast talking about this with you. We're gonna have, oh boy, I'm trying to organically mention the next guest I have on, but I also don't know who that is. So, who is the next guest?
The next guest is nothing less than the most incredible orator, analyst, critic that you'll ever have the pleasure of speaking to.
And then I splice in a clip from the future of who the next guest is. My good friend, Naomi.
Can you tell that I'm here in the same room?
Is that to me? Yes. Yes, I can tell that.
Me too.
All right. Well, that was organic. Speaking of organic, make sure to follow the podcast on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Anyway, that's all the Baki we've got to talkie. See y'all next week.
God, Steve, I wouldn't have done it if I'd known that's how it was going to end.